Ever notice how men define the one the same way they pick a blender on Amazon? 5 stars, free shipping, and absolutely no returns. No thinking, no soul-searching, just a rapid-fire check of the obvious boxes. Attractiveness, shared hobbies, and critically zero psycho vibes on the first date. Efficiency is sexy after all. If it looks good, smells tolerable, and doesn't try to murder your vibe in the first 30 minutes, men are ready to swipe right into fantasy land. For men, the one is less a profound existential truth and more a neatly packaged product with a return policy they hope they never have to invoke. Evolutionary psychologists call this pattern mate selection heuristics, but for men it's just Tuesday. Women, on the other hand, approach the one like a nuclear physicist, staring at a half-decoded formula in a dimly lit lab. There's a mental spreadsheet, a complex algorithm of emotional cues, behavioural history, stability indicators, and subtle assessments of kindness, humour quality, and long-term potential. And neuroticism. Yes, neuroticism gets a little bonus point, because somehow science has determined it's oddly attractive when filtered through a female lens. Scientists call this intricate process mate value assessment, a term that sounds as boring as it is brutally accurate. Meanwhile, the men are still stuck on 5 stars, free shipping, no psycho vibes. Aristotle once said love is composed of a single soul inhabiting 2 bodies, elegant, timeless, poetic, and completely useless as a dating manual. Men glance at this quote and think, yeah, she completes me. Cool. Women read it and analyse what single soul implies. Is he emotionally present? Does he have empathy? Can he manage existential dread without becoming a horror story? Same words, completely different interpretations. One side gets romance, the other gets an IQ test with life or death consequences. Neurobiology backs up this divide with merciless precision. Men's dopamine spikes at a glance. Visual cues light up the brain like a neon sign. It doesn't matter if the personality is an existential void. If the aesthetic is right, the brain is sold. Women, dopamine operates on a more sophisticated subscription plan. Visual cues are nice, but the narrative matters. No story, no love. A guy could have chiseled abs and a smile that launches 1,000 ships, but if the story behind him doesn't pass the internal audit, consistency, empathy, humour, and the faint whiff of future reliability, her brain isn't wiring up. Love is not a dopamine vending machine for women. It's a narrative-driven multi-stage investment. Helen Fisher, evolutionary psychologist and chief tormentor of single men everywhere, summarises it succinctly. Men fall fast, hard and visual. Women calculate, wait and evaluate. Translation: men dive straight into the pool of desire, arms flailing, hoping not to hit concrete. Women check the water temperature, the current and the depth, calculating if the jump is survivable and worth the potential emotional bruising. Men risk everything for a moment of thrill. Women risk nothing, without a guarantee that the thrill can sustain. But here's the kicker. The very concept of the one may be nothing more than a cruel, evolutionary trick. A chemical mirage engineered by millennia of reproductive imperatives to keep humans reproducing, attaching. And let's be honest, spending money on scented candles that smell vaguely like hope and regret. Men wired for immediacy, chase the spark as though it were the holy grail. Women wired for longevity, scrutinise, evaluate and often discard potential suitors who to a man seem perfectly adequate, but fail on subtle metrics invisible to casual observation. Love, it seems, is a multi-layered battlefield disguised as romance. The irony is deliciously savage. Men obsessed with immediacy often idealise partners in a way that ignores glaring red flags. The wrong psycho vibe, minor incompatibilities, or a faint scent of drama might not register until the dopamine crash. Women, patient, deliberate, and annoyingly meticulous, often see the same red flags before the first date and calculate future heartbreak scenarios while still sipping their latte. One side dives, the other plans, and somewhere in between chaos brews, hearts break, and modern romance crawls forward in a symphony of neurology, culture, and ego-driven comedy. So here's the existential cliffhanger for this episode. Can the one actually exist? Or is it simply a socially sanctioned hallucination, a cocktail of neurochemicals, evolutionary quirks, a media-fed fantasy designed to make humans feel like their emotional suffering has purpose? The debate rages as philosophers, scientists, and bitterly single friends weigh in. But the truth remains elusive, like a Tinder swipe that promises connection and delivers confusion. In this battlefield of dopamine, algorithms, and selective perception, men define the one with brutal speed and dangerous optimism. Women, meanwhile, define it with meticulous care and a strategic eye towards survival and satisfaction. Both sides are playing the same game with wildly different rulebooks, hoping to win in a match that nature scripted and pop culture edited. And maybe that is the most honest definition of the one. An impossible ideal, a neurological gamble, and a cultural myth all rolled into one spectacularly complicated, hilariously tragic human pursuit. Men and women approach the one with radically different mental toolkits, and science has spent decades trying mostly in vain to decode this madness. Men, for instance, operate under what researchers unironically call the hotter is better heuristic. Translation: physical attractiveness outweighs nearly every other metric in the opening stages of attraction. Harvard confirmed it. Brutal, but true. Personality, long-term compatibility, or whether she laughs at your terrible jokes. Optional. Men glance at a potential partner, and if she meets the visual criteria, the mental check marks are auto-filled. 5 stars, dopamine spikes engaged, and the internal monologue shouts, "Yeah, she'll do." The brutal reality is that male romantic assessment often functions like a software update. Quick, superficial, and occasionally catastrophic. Women, however, operate with the precision of a neurosurgeon and the patience of a chess grandmaster. Their checklist is far more sophisticated. Humour, intelligence, emotional insight, resource acquisition, kindness, stability, future potential, and the list goes on. Evolutionary psychologists suggest this meticulous selection serves one clear purpose: survival both for herself and potential offspring. While men are optimizing for immediate spark, women optimize for long-term compatibility, emotional resonance, and avoidance of catastrophic heartbreak. In other words, men are playing speed dating poker, while women are running actuarial tables. Here's where it gets even messier. Men tend to idealize the one quickly. Freud would probably call this a neat little ego trick, projecting fantasies, imagining scenarios, turning a human being into a personalized dreamscape. It's a survival mechanism in disguise. A man can convince himself that this stranger is perfect after roughly 5 minutes, entirely ignoring glaring flaws, personality quirks, or that weird laugh that sounds like somebody being strangled. Science explains it as dopamine-induced idealization, but humans just call it Monday. Women, by contrast, operate on a much slower, multi-layered evaluation. They filter through consistency, behavioural patterns, emotional resonance, and subtle cues that would escape even the most attentive male observer. Researchers call the difference mate value discrepancy, which in human terms is basically a compatibility risk assessment writ large. Women are calculating the probability that this person will be a tolerable life companion, while men are betting the farm on the hope that it will all work out. Biochemistry adds another layer of cruel humour. Oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, spikes in women as they perceive partner potential, fostering emotional bonding and commitment. Testosterone in men, on the other hand, simply whispers, "Yeah," and that's often sufficient to initiate romantic pursuit. One side is wiring for evaluation and careful bonding. The other is wiring for impulsive optimism. In other words, men fall fast, women fall slow, and the universe sits back with popcorn, watching the ensuing chaos. Cultural narratives pile on the confusion. Media depicts romance in ways that reinforce these differences. Men are shown heroic, decisive, rescuing damsels in distress, their value defined by conquest and action. Women are shown desiring emotionally mature, communicative partners who can navigate complexity and provide validation. Rom-coms in particular are psychological torture tests. They make men feel pressure to be the hero and women feel pressure to evaluate perfectly, while both sexes are subtly gaslighted into believing that romantic perfection exists. The result? Expectation inflation, mismatched heuristics, and a cultural feedback loop that fuels heartbreak while marketing candles and chocolates. Societal pressure adds yet another layer of ironic cruelty. Men are expected to define the one by conquest, by action, by decisiveness. Hesitate and society calls you weak. Choose wrongly, and you are doomed to regret and ridicule. Women are expected to define the one through reflection, observation, and validation. Choose impulsively, and they face guilt, social judgment, and the existential horror of wasted time. Yet despite these divergent methods, both sexes seek the same prize: certainty, emotional security, reassurance, a partner who confirms that the chaotic investment called love was worth it. Neither admits it openly, of course. Vulnerability is unsexy. Even philosophers weigh in. Alain de Botton reminds us that love is a skill, not merely a feeling. This skill is unevenly distributed and brutally applied. Men wield it with speed and enthusiasm, women with caution and calculation. The results are predictable. Men rush toward potential perfection and frequently collide with reality. Women advance cautiously, only to occasionally miscalculate subtle compatibility factors, discovering later that even a well-vetted candidate contains irreconcilable flaws. Evolutionary imperatives, cultural script, and neurochemical wiring combine to produce a modern mating landscape that is simultaneously hilarious, tragic, and savage. Psychologists call this selection asymmetry, which sounds like an academic term, but boils down to a darkly funny truth. Men and women are playing the same romantic game with radically different rulebooks. Men bet on rapid gratification and physical attraction. Women invest in relational depth and future potential. Both strategies have merits, both fail spectacularly, and both leave room for endless disappointment. Because if it were easy, no one would write self-help books, and TikTok wouldn't exist as a diary of romantic catastrophes. At the end of the day, the Checklist Conundrum is the cruel reminder that love is both a science and a circus. Men and women define the one differently because biology, culture, and evolution conspire to make it so. Men idealize, women evaluate. Men act, women plan. Men hope, women calculate. And in the theatre of modern romance, both sides emerge from the stage bewildered, bruised, and occasionally victorious, laughing at the absurdity of it all. It's messy, it's savage, and it's the only way humans ever figured out to keep reproducing, while feeling slightly clever about it. Romance is less a meeting of souls, and more a high-stakes casino, where men and women are playing entirely different games with the same chips. Women evolutionarily wired for long-term survival weigh long-term chemistry over instant sparks. They look for the patterns beneath the surface, the consistency that suggests this person will still be tolerable and, ideally, lovable after a decade of Tuesday mornings and traffic jams. Men, on the other hand, measure sparks and hope chemistry magically catches up. It's a gamble where emotions are currency and dopamine the house dealer, shuffling excitement and desire like a loaded deck. Men bet high, fast, and often on impulse. Women calculate the odds, quietly counting each emotional risk before placing a single chip. Men's fantasies are charmingly simple. Ideally, she laughs at all their jokes, never complains about the taco situation, and is vaguely enthusiastic about every impulse adventure. Practicality is optional. Women's fantasies, conversely, are mercilessly thorough. He handles crises with composure, remembers small but emotionally significant details like the dog's birthday, and aligns with her long-term plans. Practicality is mandatory. These divergent fantasies reflect biological wiring, social conditioning, and perhaps a subtle desire to punish each other for the species' poor evolutionary track record. Men dream of immediate gratification and uncomplicated joy. Women dream of stability and emotional continuity, the two things men historically have delivered in unpredictable, sometimes catastrophic quantities. Philosopher Alain de Botton offers a particularly brutal observation. Love is a skill, not just a feeling. Translation: men often fail at this skill spectacularly, with charm, confidence, and optimism unable to mask the lack of relational competence. Women, by contrast, rarely fail at love in a conscious sense. They've been conditioned to evaluate, anticipate, and mitigate risk. This skill, honed over millennia, makes them terrifyingly efficient at heartbreak avoidance, a fact men are blissfully unaware of as they stumble forward convinced that attraction alone is a sufficient metric for lifelong success. Complicating the picture is dopamine, nature's cruel prankster. Men frequently confuse lust with destiny. A surge of chemicals convinces them that a fleeting infatuation is the foundation of eternal love. Compatibility issues, red flags, and glaring warning signs are temporarily invisible under the high-voltage lights of neurochemical euphoria. Women, on the other hand, are biologically predisposed to patience and careful evaluation. But patience can be misread as tolerance. Just because a woman observes, analyses, and waits does not mean she will settle for mediocrity. She is simply executing an optimized strategy designed to maximize the chances of long-term satisfaction, while minimizing emotional carnage. Men often fail to appreciate this nuance, assuming hesitancy signals weakness rather than intelligence. Society, as always, piles on its brand of tragicomedy. Men are rewarded for decisiveness, even impulsive recklessness, and penalized for emotional depth or hesitation. Women, conversely, are punished for indecision, yet praised for discernment. The double bind ensures that everyone's expectations are skewed, frustrations are elevated, and miscommunications pile up like a tragic sitcom without a laugh track. The result is a carefully choreographed dance of frustration. Men rush forward, women analyse, both misread each other, and the universe quietly records everything in dopamine-fueled chaos. Pop culture doesn't help. Media and romantic narratives mislead both sexes simultaneously. Men chase unattainable ideals, sculpted from CGI fantasy and the distilled essence of wish fulfillment. Women, meanwhile, are trained to scrutinise flaws with the precision of Sherlock Holmes on steroids, reading into the smallest behavioural tick as evidence of future compatibility or catastrophe. The result is predictable. Men overvalue charm and appearance, women overanalyze nuance, and both sides end up bewildered, disappointed, and oddly entertained by their mutual failure to decode the same human being. Even philosophers and psychologists weigh in with grim humour. Behavioural economist Dan Ariely has demonstrated that humans consistently overvalue short-term pleasure and undervalue long-term benefit, a pattern perfectly aligned with men's tendency to leap at sparks while ignoring context. Meanwhile, women's careful, slow analysis aligns with evolutionary imperatives for long-term payoff. though cultural narratives often label this prudence as indecision. The irony is delicious. Men are punished for failure to slow down. Women are punished for thinking too much. Neither can win, and both are expected to play like it's a fair game. The cumulative effect of these cultural scripts is profound. Men learn to trust instinct over introspection. Thinking attraction equals compatibility, while women learn to trust observation over impulse. Thinking logic equals safety. But here's the exquisite twist. Neither approach guarantees success because human emotion is infinitely unpredictable. Social contexts are relentlessly messy, and evolution is the cruelest game designer imaginable. Sparks may ignite without chemistry. Chemistry may exist without sparks. The one might appear or might not, and if it does, it may have arrived 5 years too early or 10 years too late. So here's the existential hook. Can cultural expectations be rewritten, or are men doomed to swipe until 40, propelled by dopamine and fantasy? Are women doomed to overanalyze every interaction, every word, every subtle cue, always calculating but never certain? The answer is unknown, but the game continues. A perfect storm of neurobiology, evolutionary strategy, societal expectation, and catastrophic miscommunication. And in the theatre of human mating, the result is often hilarious, sometimes tragic, and always savage. The battle between fantasy and function reveals a fundamental truth about human attraction. Men and women are operating under entirely different definitions of success in love, each optimized by biology, culture, and survival imperatives. Sparks without chemistry lead to heartbreak. Chemistry without sparks leads to disillusionment. Both sexes desire connection, certainty, and satisfaction. Yet both are trapped in a system designed to test patience, sanity, and the limits of optimism. In other words, the romantic lottery is rigged, the rules are invisible, and everyone's playing the wrong game while hoping for the right prize. Romance in all its chaotic glory is ultimately a chemical farce, a neurobiological comedy orchestrated by dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, and a handful of other cruelly efficient neurotransmitters. These little molecules are the universe's way of making humans fall in love, feel invincible, and simultaneously overestimate compatibility, exaggerate sex differences, and ensure endless frustration. Dopamine lights up men like a firework display the moment they detect visual cues. Oxytocin binds women to potential partners after subtle social and emotional interactions. Vasopressin reinforces pair bonding differently for each sex. Nature, in its infinite wisdom, didn't just hand out love, it threw in a complex, gender-specific wiring diagram and called it a day. Men experience romantic euphoria like a sprint, a dopamine-fueled rocket that launches at the first sign of visual attraction and peaks with immediate infatuation. The euphoria is thrilling, intoxicating, and unfortunately short-lived, like an energy drink for the soul, with a crash that often coincides with the discovery that the person they idealized has a Netflix password problem, or a strange laugh reminiscent of a wheezing walrus. Women, on the other hand, experience emotional bonding on a slower, sustained trajectory. Their neurochemistry favors depth over immediacy, story over spark. Dopamine may build gradually, reinforced by consistency, shared experience, and the subtle evaluation of relational reliability. Men sprint, women marathon, and the track is littered with discarded expectations, forgotten crushes, and the occasional emotional disaster. Scientific studies underscore this disparity with merciless clarity. Men idealize early-stage partners, projecting fantasies and ignoring glaring red flags. A messy apartment, a slightly off-putting tone, a minor life quirk, all invisible under the high-voltage glow of romantic dopamine. Women, however, analyze carefully, sometimes detecting red flags that don't exist, but evolutionary logic dictates better to be hyper-vigilant than catastrophically wrong. Safety, survival, and long-term satisfaction require cautious scrutiny. In the biochemical lottery of love, men gamble with immediacy, women invest with prudence. One side is impulsive, the other is calculating. Both are guaranteed heartbreak at some point, though for very different reasons. Evolutionary imperatives sharpen the contrast. Men's biological mandate is simple: spread genes efficiently and frequently. Speed and reach are rewarded by millions of years of natural selection, and subtle emotional nuance often takes a back seat to reproductive opportunity. Women's biological mandate is far more intricate. Select high-quality partners capable of providing stability, resources, and emotional investment. Brutal, unnegotiable, and entirely indifferent to the romantic ideals of modern culture. Mother Nature does not care whether your crush likes tacos, posts funny memes, or says the right things on a first date. She only cares that one side spreads genes fast while the other ensures survival and quality. Mirror neurons add a deliciously cruel layer to this equation. Women subconsciously observe how a partner treats friends, family, and strangers. They evaluate compassion, social intelligence, and reliability with microsecond precision. Men, in contrast, often admire selfies, smile, and assume that attractiveness equals adequacy. The neural wiring's brutally optimized for different tasks. One sex calculates relational value, the other checks aesthetics and immediate reward. The result is predictable: a mismatch between expectation and perception, a subtle comedy of errors played out in real time on dating apps, bars, and awkward dinner dates. Oxytocin, the fabled love hormone, operates with similarly gendered cruelty. Men's oxytocin spikes primarily via sexual activity. The act itself binds them to their partner, creating short-term pair bonding, often divorced from long-term relational strategy. Women's oxytocin spikes in response to shared emotional experience. Meaningful conversations, acts of trust, moments of vulnerability. Men love the act, women love the context. This divergence explains countless anecdotes in which men feel attached after a weekend fling, while women remain ambivalently calculating, wondering whether it's worth emotional investment. One sex loves fast, the other loves strategically. Pair bonding, it turns out, is an entirely different sport. Men may love partners for the immediate satisfaction they provide, the novelty, the excitement. Women, meanwhile, love partners who fit into a broader life narrative, shared goals, compatible values, and the faint whiff of future stability. The man who appears perfect in the moment may fail spectacularly in the long game. The woman who evaluates meticulously may miss sparks that could have blossomed if he had only survived the stress test. Chemistry, narrative context, and the slow unfolding of behaviour determine success or heartbreak in this high-stakes biological theatre. The cruel punchline of all this neurochemical wiring is clarity in delay. Men fall fast but forget faster, their attachments subject to rapid dopamine decay and immediate disappointment. Women take longer to fall in love, but when they do, it is a carefully calculated investment with neurological, psychological, and evolutionary insurance. The stakes are high, the rules invisible, and the human cost enormous. But the game continues, endlessly rerun in bars, apps, and awkward family gatherings. Ultimately, the neurochemistry of hope and despair reveals a savage truth about human attraction. It is simultaneously brilliant, brutal, and designed to fail spectacularly with regularity. Men sprint into infatuation. Women pace themselves with analytical precision. Chemical surges make sparks irresistible, yet often misleading. Emotional investment is mediated by hormones, evolved instincts, and narrative perception. The result is a messy, hilarious, sometimes tragic romance that keeps humans reproducing, suffering, and telling stories about love as though they understand it. In other words, love may be less about finding the one and more about surviving a biological obstacle course with your dignity and dopamine intact. When it comes to romance, men and women approach the investment game with radically different financial strategies, complete with their own cognitive risk analyses, emotional spreadsheets, and disastrous forecasting errors. Men, as usual, define the one by immediate payoff, happiness, excitement, and low maintenance. She laughs at your jokes, looks good doing it, and doesn't overanalyze your texting patterns. Boom. 5 stars. Dopamine engaged, and the investment seems sound. Women, however, calculate the relationship ROI with the precision of a venture capitalist evaluating a startup. Emotional safety, shared goals, compatibility, longevity. All variables meticulously assessed. Men gamble on instant sparks. Women strategize for sustained emotional dividends. Economists studying human mating would find this hilarious. Women optimize mate selection like seasoned investors, assessing risk, growth potential, and long-term sustainability. Men invest like lottery players, dropping chips on the number that looks luckiest in the moment. The psychological implications are clear. Men's approach is exhilarating but precarious. Women's approach is cautious but brutally effective. The market of human attraction is inherently asymmetric, and men are notoriously oblivious to the mismatch. Philosophy, ever the merciless commentator on human folly, weighs in. Arthur Schopenhauer might have said it best. Men desire pleasure, women desire security, and both disguise it as love. Men are seduced by thrill and novelty, blind to relational longevity. Women pursue stability and compatibility, often reading subtext and projecting potential growth, while men are busy imagining her laughing at taco jokes in perpetuity. The truth is that love, at least as evolution sees it, is a veneer over deeply ingrained survival strategies, dressed up in sentimentality and bad poetry. Relationship scientist Dr. John Gottman provides a brutally practical frame. Successful long-term partners exhibit trust, humour, and conflict resolution skills. Notice how men frequently skip step 1. Step 2, optional. Men often fall headlong into thrill, blissfully ignoring the painstaking work of cultivating relational resilience. Women, meanwhile, assess these variables consciously and unconsciously, building a mental database of trustworthiness, emotional intelligence, and conflict handling ability. They are the analysts, the strategists, the portfolio managers of romance. Men are the gamblers, the impulsive thrill seekers who think a weekend of excitement can substitute for decades of compatibility. Women often evaluate potential growth as a crucial metric. Will he evolve, mature, adapt, contribute meaningfully to a shared life? Men, in contrast, prioritize immediate gain. Does she make me laugh tonight, look amazing in my hoodie, and ignore my terrible driving habits? Men are impulsive investors. Women are long-term strategists. The cumulative effect is a recurring mismatch of expectation, timing, and emotional investment. Men leap. Women calculate. The universe sits back and records the results in heartbreaks and awkward coffee dates. Attachment styles exacerbate the irony. Men often skew avoidant, retreating at signs of commitment or vulnerability. Women skew anxious, hypervigilant about relational security and future outcomes. The resulting dance fuels both romantic comedy clichés and tragicomic reality. Missed cues, misaligned timing, and endless misinterpretations of intent. One side withdraws, the other overanalyzes. Both suffer from the same desire: connection. And yet the emotional economics rarely align. The cosmic joke is exquisite. The very person a man defines as the one in 5 minutes is often the person a woman painstakingly evaluates for 5 months or longer before identifying potential. Timing mismatch is the cruel punchline, the universal gag at the expense of human impulsivity and caution. Men act too fast, women wait too long. Both end up wondering why they aren't aligned on the same emotional timeline. One dopamine spike, one careful spreadsheet, and suddenly the romantic market is a catastrophe of expectation. Cultural expectations twist the knife further. Men fear commitment because it represents a loss of autonomy, while women fear wasting time on a partner who fails the long-term compatibility test. Both are chasing a mirage of perfect timing, a mythical equilibrium in which sparks, chemistry, stability, and desire all coincide effortlessly. Spoiler, it never does. Evolution didn't design humans to synchronize perfectly. It designed them to survive, reproduce, and suffer with dramatic flair. The result is a predictable pattern of romantic chaos punctuated by occasional, miraculous alignment. The biological and social underpinnings of these strategies are clear. Men are wired to prioritize immediacy and novelty, women to prioritize sustainability and evaluation. Combine this with dopamine-driven idealization, cultural scripts, and mismatched expectations, and the modern dating landscape is a cruelly amusing theatre. Men bet impulsively, women invest strategically, and the universe observes the outcome with grim humour. Romantic ROI is rarely immediate. Profits are measured in emotional endurance, compatibility, and occasionally mutual delight. Metrics that men are historically terrible at tracking in real time. Ultimately, the lesson is simple and savage. The one men define in a rush is often the one women define with care, the one who fits their life narrative, and the one whose long-term investment actually pays off. Men chase thrill. Women evaluate risk. Men seek immediate gratification. Women strategize for decades of potential payoff. In this ecosystem, understanding neurobiology, evolutionary psychology, and cultural conditioning isn't just useful. It's the only way to survive the emotional casino without losing your heart entirely. The romantic ROI may not guarantee happiness, but it does provide a brutal, entertaining map of human desire, impulse, and strategic patience. Romance, when stripped of dopamine, social script, and bad poetry, reveals itself as a grand theatre of illusions. Both sexes are trapped, like hamsters in separate wheels, running furiously toward idealized visions of love. Men imagine romance as conquest, a heroic sprint toward gratification, validation, and occasional domestic bliss. Women imagine romance as narrative fulfillment, a meticulously edited story where the protagonist ideally is competent, considerate, and emotionally aligned. Each gender is chasing a phantom, an archetype, a chemically enhanced hallucination reinforced by evolutionary imperatives and cultural conditioning. The stakes are enormous, the returns uncertain, and the cosmic joke delicious. Existential philosopher Søren Kierkegaard might have nailed it when he wrote, "Love is the expression of the self's deepest anxiety." Every longing glance, every hesitant text, every first date gone catastrophically wrong is essentially an existential performance. Men and women alike live this daily, each reacting to the neurochemical chaos inside them, while projecting expectations shaped by centuries of social conditioning. Men rush headlong into infatuation, convinced that visual sparks equate to destiny. Women analyse, calculate, and project, assessing potential with the precision of a forensic accountant. Anxiety is baked in. Desire is unavoidable. Reality, as usual, is a relentless critic. Men in particular are spectacularly prone to projecting fantasies onto actual humans. She completes me, they say, blissfully unaware that Aristotle's original line was more nuanced. Love is composed of a single soul, inhabiting two bodies. Cue centuries of misinterpretation and Instagram captions. The poetic license is charming until reality intrudes. Mismatched personalities, incompatible schedules, and the subtle horror of discovering that someone you idealised actually has a loud laugh that sounds like an angry walrus. Fantasies are cheap, immediate and dopamine-fueled. Reality is messy, slow and emotionally taxing. Men sprint from fantasy to fantasy, hoping chemistry will reconcile the gaps. Spoiler, it rarely does. Women, meanwhile, decode behaviour with microscopic attention, analysing emotional resonance, consistency, and relational history. Every laugh, every gesture, every story is an input into an internal algorithm that rates long-term compatibility. And yet, despite meticulous evaluation, women sometimes end up with the man who should have been ignored, archived, and promptly deleted from the mental Rolodex. The universe, as always, laughs softly at human diligence, rewarding patience and caution with occasional absurdity. Cognitive dissonance reigns supreme. Men insist she's perfect, while women insist he could be better. Both illusions are necessary lubricants for civilization, ensuring humans reproduce despite misaligned heuristics and flawed dopamine wiring. Idealism versus realism fuels the comedy further. Men romanticize appearance, charm, and immediate thrill, projecting narrative arcs onto physical cues and charisma. Women romanticize consistency, reliability, and emotional intelligence, reading into subtle patterns as though their lives depended on it, because evolution assures that in a sense they do. The resulting mismatch is predictable, hilarious, and occasionally catastrophic. Men fall fast, women fall slow, and both fall into the traps of expectation and longing, often simultaneously misunderstanding one another's intentions, timing, and definition of success. Redefining the one would require abandoning cultural scripts entirely. Let go of Instagram-ready love stories, rom-com logic, and poetic misquotes. Embrace neurochemistry and accept that dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin are quietly mocking all attempts at rational decision-making. Perhaps the one isn't a person at all, but a narrative, a construct, a cocktail of desire, idealism, and misaligned expectations. Evolution doesn't care if humans suffer or if your love life resembles a Shakespearean tragedy, edited by a sitcom writer on a sugar high. It only cares that you survive, reproduce, and propagate the species with neurochemical enthusiasm. Science, philosophy, and bitter life lessons converge here. The one is as much a reflection of our biology as it is of our culture, as much an existential anxiety as it is a neurochemical illusion. Men define the one in moments, snapshots fueled by visual triggers and dopamine spikes. Women define the one over months, careful analysis and narrative evaluation. And yet, despite these divergent methods, both sides are perpetually disappointed, endlessly entertained, and occasionally enlightened. The one is a mirror reflecting both what we desire and what we fail to achieve. It is simultaneously ideal, illusory, and devastatingly real. The cruel humour of human attraction is that by the time either sex recognises the mismatch between ideal and reality, the illusion has already done its work. Hearts have been invested, expectations inflated, and social narratives reinforced. Men learn slowly that conquest does not equal satisfaction. Women learn slowly that careful analysis does not guarantee perfection. Both learn, if they are lucky, that the pursuit itself, the chaos, the misalignment, the existential wrestling, is the only consistent reality in a world otherwise ruled by uncertainty. Illusions, ideals, and existential crisis is a meditation on the human condition. Our biology, our culture, and our neurochemistry conspire to make love simultaneously irresistible and punishing. Men sprint toward visions of conquest and fantasy. Women pace themselves toward stories of stability and fulfillment. Both navigate cognitive dissonance, cultural expectation, and chemical chaos, striving for connection while negotiating disappointment. In the end, perhaps the one is less a person and more a mirror of our own illusions, a reflection of both our desires and our disillusionment, a savage yet necessary reminder that love is simultaneously exhilarating, tragic and completely unavoidable. The one is the ultimate paradox of human romance. It may exist, a mystical alignment of chemistry, compatibility, timing, and sheer luck, or it may be nothing more than a statistical error baked into our mating algorithms. Either way, hope is the gasoline that keeps the engine of human desire sputtering forward, reckless and oblivious to the reality that nature doesn't negotiate with idealism. Men fall fast, propelled by dopamine, visual cues and the intoxicating illusion of immediate gratification. Women fall slow, guided by oxytocin, narrative context, and a careful calculus of long-term viability. Both crash into reality eventually, often spectacularly. Love in this light is inefficient, unpredictable, messy, and absolutely hilarious. Philosophers have offered their insights with varying degrees of solemnity and sarcasm. Plato famously suggested that love is a search for one's missing half, an eternal pursuit of wholeness. Modern science, however, prefers less poetic but arguably more accurate language. It's a search for compatible neurochemistry, emotional resonance, and social alignment. The romantic ideal may be a construct, but the need for connection is biological, cultural, and profoundly compelling. Humans are hardwired to desire intimacy, yet we are simultaneously equipped with instincts that ensure it is rarely straightforward. The cosmic joke is inescapable. We want unity, but evolution designed us for challenge, not perfection. Every human relationship is a study in mutual exasperation. Men complain she's complicated. Women complain he's emotionally lazy. This iterative frustration fuels the folklore of romance, from ancient myths to contemporary rom-coms, ensuring a steady supply of cautionary tales and bitterly funny anecdotes. The truth is that expectations are misaligned from the start. Men armed with dopamine-fueled idealization are shocked when personality defects manifest in ways they didn't anticipate. Women armed with analytic patience and emotional foresight are shocked when the spark of attraction wanes despite all logical compatibility. The mismatch is baked into biology, reinforced by culture and magnified by human imagination. The cruelest part is that every instinct designed to help humans select a mate often guarantees repeated failure. Men are drawn to immediate visual and behavioural cues, only to discover that charisma without depth is a recipe for disappointment. Women are drawn to consistency, intelligence, and social reliability, only to discover that predictability without chemistry is equally unsatisfying. Romantic irony ensures that we miscalculate, misinterpret, and misinvest with near precision, guaranteeing heartbreak, exasperation, and the occasional accidental success. Evolution didn't intend for humans to have perfect accuracy in love. It intended for humans to reproduce, survive, and occasionally laugh at their own mistakes. Timing compounds the paradox. The one men define as the 1 in 5 minutes is frequently the person women identify as viable only after months or years of careful evaluation. Conversely, women may designate a partner as potentially ideal, only to see the man's fleeting interest fade with the sudden spike or crash of neurochemical enthusiasm. The result is a tragicomic theatre of mismatched timelines, misaligned expectations, and chemically mediated misperceptions. The audience? Society cynically entertained, documenting these errors in memes, novels, and dating horror stories that will outlive any individual romance. Romantic logic is by design inherently self-defeating. Attraction without compatibility, compatibility without attraction. Immediate desire versus strategic patience. Every variable conspires to maximize human confusion. Even the language of love is misleading. Words like soulmate, chemistry, and destiny imply clarity where there is none. In reality, love is an iterative experiment in which humans repeatedly misfire, misjudge, and misinterpret. learning lessons they often forget in the heat of dopamine or the slow burn of oxytocin. Every failed romance is a recalibration, a brutal lesson in survival disguised as emotional chaos. And yet hope persists. Humans continue to chase the one, as if the next swipe, the next encounter, or the next narrative alignment will yield perfection. Perhaps the point isn't to succeed on the first attempt or the 10th, but to endure, to misfire spectacularly, while learning the cruel art of sarcasm, patience, and self-awareness. Maybe the one is less a person, and more a narrative, a psychological construct we use to justify emotional risk, maintain optimism and feel justified in loving, despite repeated failures. The cat unbothered by neurochemistry may indeed offer a more stable companion in the long term. Science, philosophy, and bitter life experience converge in the closing truth. Love is simultaneously exhilarating, irrational, and profoundly instructive. Men and women chase ideals, projections, and chemical highs, colliding in patterns that are part comedy, part tragedy. The paradox of the perfect match is not about discovering a flawless individual, but about navigating chaos, interpreting signals, and embracing the messiness inherent in human connection. Every relationship is a gamble, every emotional investment a mix of biology, culture, and sheer dumb luck. We define the one as much as the one defines the limits of our patience, tolerance, and capacity for disillusionment. So here's the final punch. Maybe the one isn't a person at all. Maybe it's the story we tell ourselves to justify all the chaos, the missed signals, the heartbreaks, and the improbable victories. Or maybe it's indeed your cat, judging you silently but consistently, providing emotional returns far more reliable than dopamine spikes, narrative fantasies, or the latest romantic misadventure. Either way, the paradox persists, hope endures, and humanity continues its spectacular quest for real connection.